Guy wouldn't let me pass him on the highway, so I got him pulled over. A while back now, I was driving home on a 2-lane highway between cities pretty late at night, and a dude in a Dodge Charger was in front of me. We were both going a bit above the limit, nothing crazy, only like 10 kilometers per hour for him and 20 kilometers per hour for me. I wanted to pass, so I moved into the left passing lane, and he proceeded to accelerate to exceed my speed and jump into the left lane to cut me off. I thought nothing of it. Figured he was speeding up and I still get to go the speed I wanted, so I got back in the right lane and kept at the same speed, but then the fucker jumps back in the right lane to cut me off again and slows down to below the limit. Every time I tried to pass him, he'd do the same thing. After like 20 minutes of this, as I've done this drive many times, I remembered we were getting close to a side road where police like to hide. So I stepped on the gas and went like 40 over the limit, and sure enough, he tried to cut me off again by going about 50 over. I quickly slowed down right before we passed the side road, and the cop immediately jumped out and pulled him over. I've never felt a greater moment of satisfaction in my life. If you're out there, Dodge Charger guy, fuck you. Think my race ruined your family? Enjoy the results of the genetic testing. Short version. At my son's birth, my ex-partner's mom told me that I'd ruined their family by having a kid with her son and tainting their family line. We're both white, but they're from a neighboring country that they pride themselves on. They showed themselves to be really vile racists in general. I'm glad we aren't family anymore, and his dad walked out a few years ago too, so the trash took itself out. Cut to yesterday. My son got the results of our genetic test kits he got as a present. He's interested in the TikToks of people seeing where they come from. Me, 81% of the background they're so precious about. No trace of the genetic profile they hate so much. My son, 53%, with around 16% of a background that they hate. Guess it wasn't me that was doing any polluting. The very first thing my son did was send his dad/grandmother the results, and obviously he has no idea of what she said at his birth, but man, that has to have hurt her a little. Tell me I'm lying about having cancer? Enjoy getting chemo vomit on your shoes. This happened almost a year ago. At the time, I was taking a bus regularly to a hospital for chemotherapy, which left me extremely weak and nauseous. So, when possible, I sat in the handicap section near the front of the bus. Occasionally people would ask me to move. It's a bus to a hospital, so a lot of people need the disabled seats, and I am young and outwardly looked healthy after my hair had started growing back. Of course, they'd understand when I explained that I needed the seat. Enter bitcha lady, a smartly dressed woman in her 60s. She asks me for my seat, and I explain that I just had chemotherapy and I need the seat. She calls me lazy, calls me a liar, and tells me that I don't look sick. I am too exhausted and nauseous to deal with this bullshit. I've been trying to not throw up for the last half hour. Fuck it, I decide, and aim. I puke all over her nice shoes. She screams and jumps back. I wish I'd said something witty right then, but I was busy just puking. She stood quietly, red-faced, at the other end of the bus, and left me alone after that. In retrospect, I feel like an asshole for making the bus driver clean up my puke. I was too much of a wreck to help. I could barely stand up, though I did apologize to him. It was a spur-of-the-moment decision, and I didn't really think that consequence through. But damn, it was satisfying to puke all over that bitch. I left a dirt stain on man's white Nikes because he wouldn't move his feet on a flight. I was flying home from a work trip on AA. Now on this flight, a man sat next to me. He wasn't super tall, about average in height. He needed to go to the bathroom, so I got up, let him out, and got up again to let him in. As I sat back down, my leg hit his. I looked down to see his leg about halfway into my aisle, leaving me with about 1/3 of the space I had. I'm thinking he's going to move, and he's got plenty of space because he doesn't have a bag under his seat, but he keeps it there. I'm sitting side saddle in my seat at this point. I look at him, then at his leg, then back at him. He blatantly stares at me, then pulls out his phone and just starts playing on it. So what I do is lift my foot and place it over his foot, setting the dirty sole of my Converses on what looks like new white Nikes, fabric ones too, not leather. He immediately whips his head up at me, and I, following his example, pulled out my tablet and started reading. He pulls his foot away and had a nasty attitude the whole plane ride. Boo it, I got my space back. Costco revenge. I wasn't there, but my mom told me this story. My mom accidentally ran into someone's heel with her cart in Costco. My mom is the nicest lady ever and started apologizing profusely, But the guy was just nasty. Cussed her out so loud, and my mom stayed calm and apologized some more, but finally had to walk away when he just kept berating her. Later, when she got up to the checkout, a couple approached her, snickering and trying not to bust up laughing. My mom was confused until they conspiratorially told her, "We saw how bad you felt for running into that guy and saw how nasty he was to you, and then we saw him leave his cart to go grab something. So we took his cart way over to the other side of the store and he is going crazy looking for it." My mom, despite being the nicest lady ever, nearly died laughing. How I made bratty Thumbelina stop flirting with my boyfriend. Back in high school, I dated a guy who we'll call Jared. After school, Jared and I would hang out at his place with a group of 3 to 5 friends. One girl in our group of friends was interesting. We'll call her Trixie. Trixie was a petite girl whose entire personality revolved around being cute and petite. Also, despite being in a relationship herself, she was clearly into Jared. She would claim that things were too heavy and ask only him to carry them, comment on how tall he was compared to her, ask him for piggyback rides, just general nonsense that made us both sort of uncomfortable. I wouldn't tolerate this now, but we did at the time because we liked hanging out with her boyfriend. Well, it being that time of the month, I bought a new box of tampons to keep under the sink. It was one of those variety packages that includes different sizes, important for later. Later that afternoon, I went to grab one and noticed that 6 or 7 of the light tampons were already missing. What the hell? Then I realized Trixie had been going to the bathroom a lot, being so aggressively petite and adorable. I guess she considered it beneath her to use regular tampons. When we hung out the next day, she finished all of the light ones. I was wondering what she'd do when she approached me off to the side and asked if I had any more. I quietly told her no, sorry, but she could always use a bigger size so she wouldn't have to change them so often. She answered very loudly, looking right at Jared, "Oh, I can't use those jumbo tampons like you. I'm way too tiny." What the hell? I guess she thought it would sound sexy or something. So what did I do? I hid the entire box of tampons in his room and replaced it with a box of diaper-thick maxi pads that I only wear to bed. The next time she went to the bathroom, she was in there a long time, probably searching for the tampons I'd moved. When she finally came out wearing one of the diaper-sized pads, she crinkled like a fucking newspaper wherever she walked. Jared, knowing full well, asked the room at large, "What's that sound?" She left shortly afterward. She also cold-shouldered me from then on, which was just an added bonus as far as I was concerned. As a cherry on top of the cake, I heard through the grapevine that she's gained at least 50 pounds since high school. Hopefully she's found a new personality trait or two. Enjoy that 0 on the final exam. This was the end of senior year of undergrad. I was rather studious, never missed a class, paid attention, turned in every assignment on time, got good grades. This other kid in class was nice enough, but a slacker, would bang his phone all class and was the worst group teammate. Throughout the term, we would say hi in passing, but that's about it. Desks in this class were the type where 2 people desks, and while there were no assigned seats, students tend to sit in the same seats all semester. So it struck me odd that when I sat in my seat, well prepared for the final, that Mr. Slacker immediately sat next to me. The exam was to be 80% Scantron/multiple choice and 20% essay, and was to be 50% of our final grade in the class. I had a strong feeling the extent of Mr. Slacker's exam preparation was his plan to cheat off of me. Professor was so lax, he sat at the front reading during exams. Sure enough, every time I turned a page, he turned a page. When I would fill in a circle, he would fill in a circle. Some students huddle over their papers to fend off cheaters. I leaned back, making it exceptionally easy for him. The only problem for him, though, was I would make a tiny dot next to the correct answer and fill in the wrong bubble for all 80 questions. Not surprisingly, we finished the multiple choice section at the exact same time, and I moved on to the essay section. Mr. Slacker, however, felt that 80, or maybe a few wrong, of the total 100, was good enough, and he went ahead and turned in his exam, skipping the essay section altogether. I finished the long answers, corrected my Scantron, and turned it all in. Did not hear his name called at graduation. Supervisors tried to make me look bad, so I made them look worse. I'm an attorney and used to work at a state government office, where I had 2 supervisors, one for my practice group and one for my section, who from the very beginning decided to make it their business to treat me like shit. Section Chief had a habit of sitting on client questions for days, then assigning them to me. Then, when the client would inevitably ask why it was taking so long to do their stuff, she'd respond only that I was the one working on that stuff, making it look like the delay was my fault. Similarly, Group Supervisor's favorite cockweaseltry was to try to get me in trouble with both clients and higher-ups in our office for not doing things fast enough. Despite the fact that she would procrastinate for weeks on reviewing/signing off on work, I actually did very fast indeed. But what these hose beasts did not know was that A, I was saving all the emails they sent me that would include information like dates they assigned me work, etc., and B, one of the aforementioned higher-ups was my former boss during an externship in law school, so he liked me and knew I wasn't lazy or an idiot. So one day Group Supervisor assigned me a question from our client agency involving a citizen's public records request, and I prepared a draft response within an hour and sent it back to her. I needed her to sign off on it before I advised the client. But despite my getting a read receipt for my email, she didn't respond for the rest of the day, or the rest of the week. Edit in response to a question raised in the comments. I had a policy of following up with people when I didn't get timely responses, but had previously been told by this supervisor that she didn't need reminding about my email, so I stopped doing that with her. The client was supposed to answer the records request within a tight deadline under the law, and eventually emailed Group Supervisor to ask where the hell their answer was. Group Supervisor finally woke up and forwarded her original email, assigning me the work to Section Chief to complain that I didn't do it in good time. And then Section Chief forwarded that to the client and told them it was my fault it wasn't done yet. So I, having finally had enough, rubbed my little hands together in delight and proceeded to reply all to Section Chief's email to client, attaching my email to Group Supervisor containing the draft response. I innocently wrote, "Apologies for the inconvenience, client. Our office rule is to wait for supervisory sign-off before providing advice, but I've nevertheless attached draft advice prepared on date. Group Supervisor and Section Chief, do you agree with this advice? May client act upon it?" Forward that response to former boss and very politely ask him, in instances where there is a tight time frame to respond to a client question, is it okay to provide the client with provisional draft advice like this within the deadline, but let them know a supervisor needs a little more time to do their review and sign off? The client ended up praising me for my efforts to get a response to him in a timely fashion. And former boss thanked me for my question, but said it should never be an issue in the first place, then sent out an office-wide notice to remind supervisors that they must provide necessary sign-offs on advice within deadlines, and must never blame those under them for delays in front of clients, because that affects the image of the whole office. He attached the emails in my matter as an example of what supervisors should not do. So literally everyone saw what incompetent ass-clowns they were. He wanted all his stuff back, so I made sure he got everything. Obligatory I'm on mobile, so forgive me for formatting. So my last relationship was beyond bad. He was all sorts of abusive and controlling. At one point I had the strength to break up with him, but then we got back together after we discussed some things. Stupid, I know, but yeah, love and all that. Well, anyways, one of the things we agreed on was that he and I would stop drinking alcohol because he was beyond crazy aggressive when he drank, and I wanted to support his sobriety. This is really important. Fast forward about 8 months or so, and we got into a huge fight, and I not only broke up with him, I kicked him out of the house and told him he wasn't ever allowed back inside. We'd been living together over a year at this point, so his mom got in touch with me about getting his stuff. While on the phone with her, I could hear him in the background saying, "Make sure they get everything I own or bought. I want it all back." Apparently even stuff he gifted me he wanted back, but honestly I didn't care. I was happy to get rid of anything related to him. While cleaning our room up and gathering everything, I started to come across numerous bottles and cans of alcohol. It seems he had been drinking again for a while, and was hiding the evidence in the room. I mean, he was hiding them under the bed, in his guitar case, rolled up in his clothes, in some old backpacks of mine, and so on and so forth. He had said he wanted everything of his, so any bottle and the few unopened cans I found went straight into one of the garbage bags of his stuff. By the time I had gathered everything up, I had 3 bags of stuff, and one was basically all just the alcohol. Dropping them off was just so satisfying. He actually called moments after I left his parents' place, ranting about how petty and immature I was being. My response? Well, you wanted all of your stuff back, and those definitely weren't mine. Plus, I figured you'd probably need a drink to deal with the breakup. I promptly ended the call and blocked him on everything. Most satisfying thing I've ever done. Neighbor won't stay off my property, gets fenced out. A little background. My current place is a fairly new build, backs to some woods, and was empty for a bit before we moved in. My neighbor has a corner lot, also backs to woods, but is a bit odd-shaped since the woods are considered protected green space. Because of this situation, they had used maybe a third of my backyard when they did outdoor activities, volleyball, badminton, etc. None of this bothered me because their kids are really nice and respectful. Fast forward a couple of years, and I'm having the backyard renovated. Well, the neighbor apparently had an issue with this because he kept bothering the crew during construction, telling them what they could and couldn't do, saying they were too loud or doing things wrong, and claiming that I had asked him to oversee the crew. Spoiler, I did not. Eventually, the head contractor has had enough and complains to me about the micromanagement. I go talk to the neighbor, and he's acting like he's doing me a huge favor by keeping them in line, but agrees to back off. And he does for about 2 days. I get an alert on my ring on a day the crew is off, and there was my neighbor on my patio, picking up, inspecting, and throwing down some pavers that had already been laid. I tell him to kindly get the fuck off my property, and he proceeds to flip me off and walk back to his place. Time for the petty revenge. When we first moved in, I had a whole house natural gas generator put in because power outages are common when thunderstorms roll through. Thing about those is, they're loud when they turn on, and since we were doing the renovation, I planned on putting a living fence in across from the generator to mute some of the sound that would travel to his place. Well, I talked to the head contractor, and we happily agreed to shift the trees from the generator down to the woods and essentially cut off his property from my property. Neighbor was not happy about that move and called the city surveyor to dispute the property line. But my contractor had made sure that we were fully on my property with about 8 inches to spare to account for tree growth. End result, neighbor pissed, but powerless. I have some nice trees to look at in the backyard, and there's nothing to stop the symphony of my generator when it kicks on every week to do a status check. How do you like that donut now? This happened about 20 years ago when I was a teacher in a small high school. There was one teacher who was toxic and would say inappropriate things to students about the teachers he didn't like. He once told some students of mine that I didn't get invited to parties because I was a stiff. His dislike for me stemmed from the fact that I was vying for promotion to vice principal, and he felt threatened by it. He did a bunch of other things that gave me a slam-dunk workplace harassment case against him, but I never pursued it. One day, he brought in donuts and left them in the staff room. However, being the guy he was, he put little toothpick flags in them with everyone's names on them but mine. He also left a note on the table saying, "Help yourself. Not you, brother." The one with his name on it was one of those powdered, jelly-filled things. In full view of some of the other teachers who were gobsmacked by his behavior, I took a straw, sucked all the jelly out of it, then refilled it with mustard. Then I put it back into the box, unwrapped my sandwich, and waited. He came into the lunchroom with a shit-eating grin on his face as he looked at me and nodded. I munched my carrot sticks. One of the women thanked him for the donuts. He just smirked, picked his up, and took a big bite of it right in front of me. The look of horror, confusion, and disgust on his face was priceless.